There were a few women who tried every means to get pregnant with a baby boy and then dreamed of taking root beside Hannah's father. In the end, however, they were completely defeated by Hannah and her mother, leaving not even a single leaf behind. After all, Hannah's father already had 2 sons, Hannah's twin younger brothers. Naturally, he wasn't that interested in offspring from outside. Originally, Hannah and her mother had turned a blind eye to these matters, thinking that as Hannah's father was getting older and the children were already grown up, no big waves could be stirred up even if there were troubles. But unexpectedly, there was trouble in this old relationship. No one knew which part of Hannah's father's heart this girl had captured, but she really managed to make him have some improper thoughts. Not only did she get pregnant, but he also hid her secretly, promising that whether it was a boy or a girl, as long as the baby was born, it would be the crystallization of their love and would be able to inherit a share of the family property. How could Hannah and her mother tolerate this? They immediately took people to find this mistress and were determined to make her abort the child. However, this mistress got wind of it in advance. She wanted to run away but was afraid of being blocked at the door. After thinking it over, she came up with a bad idea. She gave money to the staff at the homestay and swapped the sign of her courtyard with that of the orange-red courtyard next to it. So when Hannah and her mother quietly led people into the courtyard and rushed straight to the bedroom and kicked the door open, they were shocked to find not a hen hatching eggs but a couple in an intimate embrace. Originally, it would have been okay if they just let the couple run away. But they happened to bring an unprofessional little reporter with them, intending to film an educational video and then spread it around later to warn those other women who had designs on Hannah's father. Anyway, Hannah's father already had a reputation for being flirtatious. As long as they could hold on to the property tightly, they weren't afraid of airing their family's dirty laundry. But things turned out differently. Instead of getting the educational video they wanted, this paparazzo captured a big piece of news. This paparazzo knew Chloe. He had been involved in the big news about the children being swapped in a wealthy family before. If it were other paparazzi, they might have to think twice about whether to release the news or not. But this one was different. He was the kind of person who loved to stir up trouble. As long as it could create a buzz, he dared to expose any kind of material. He was like a cockroach, squeezing into every crack. Otherwise, Hannah and her mother wouldn't have chosen him. This way of revealing news by skirting around the important issues was his usual trick. By the time someone realized and wanted to do public relations work, it was already too late. The news had already spread. This was really a ridiculous and ironic story. Sure enough, the older ones are wiser. If it were just Hannah alone, she definitely wouldn't have handled this matter so neatly. It must have been Hannah's mother's plan. She not only helped her precious daughter make Chloe's life a mess but also got rid of the trouble. When the Jewell family and the Zachary family came to ask for an explanation, they could just push the mistress out. Hannah's father could only swallow his anger. It was also a way for her to vent her anger. Next time Hannah's father wanted to have any improper ideas, he would have to think twice. The sign was changed by the mistress. Hannah and her mother were just dealing with family affairs. After realizing something was wrong, they also directly apologized and left. They even asked the paparazzo to hand over the camera in front of Zachary. No one expected that this paparazzo still had a hidden pinhole camera on him, and he was notoriously unscrupulous and directly exposed the whole thing. Even though the Jewell family and the Zachary family were furious, they could only vent their anger on the mistress. At most, they could give the Hannah family a hard time, but they wouldn't really take serious actions. After all, the Hannah family wasn't an easy target either. There was no need for the two families to go to great lengths to fight over something without proper reasons. If the two families were really vengeful and didn't care about appearances at all, they wouldn't have reached their current positions. As for why this mistress suddenly went to this homestay to soak in the hot springs and happened to live next to the orange-red courtyard, and whether she really managed to change the sign, all these remained unknown. Maybe just like when I passed by the theater and looked at the posters a few more times and my brother bought the tickets, she also happened to hear or see something and had a sudden idea? In short, since Hannah and her mother dared to arrange things like this, it meant that they weren't afraid of being investigated. Even if it was found out later that Hannah had deliberately set up a trap, this fire wouldn't burn me anyway. I had already gotten into the habit of going out for a walk with my brother these days. On that day, Hannah wasn't at the theater at all. I was just looking at the posters of the musical actor, and it was my brother who took the initiative to propose buying the tickets. Not to mention that I wasn't familiar with Hannah's good friend at all and hadn't even spoken to her. Even if we met, who would think so much? I was just unlucky to be overheard. If someone listened to my recordings, all they would hear were my blessings. All of this had nothing to do with me. It was Hannah and the others who had bad intentions. I'm different from that woman who can only compete with me with the help of the system. She likes to torture people with soft means, and no matter what, she will be covered in blood. While I prefer to kill with a borrowed knife and leave no trace. There was such a big fuss last night. In the morning, everyone in the family looked unhappy. Mom's eyes were swollen from crying like walnuts. Dad was on the phone in the study with a gloomy face. My brother sat on the sofa without saying a word. Of course, I knew they couldn't accept it. Although Zachary had been chasing Chloe closely, whenever Chloe mentioned Zachary in private, she would always say shyly that they had only known each other for a few months and wanted to get to know each other better. Everyone thought that the two of them hadn't completely broken through that layer of the relationship yet. But suddenly they learned that not only had that layer been broken through, but everything had been laid bare. I comforted Mom over and over again, saying, "It's okay. Anyway, everyone knows that our Jewel family has an engagement with the Zachary family. We might as well take this opportunity to let them get engaged." It's understandable that an engaged couple couldn't control their feelings and did something a bit over the line. We can just find a public relations company to clarify it later. I had stayed up all night and looked haggard. I deliberately bit my lips several times and before going downstairs. I even put some mint toothpaste on my eyes to make them bloodshot. I wanted to look more haggard than anyone else, yet also seem more positive in blessing their marriage. At this moment, Mom seemed to finally remember how much I used to like Zachary. She touched my face and started crying again. Before Chloe came back, I enjoyed the long-lost care from the whole family. But this time I didn't feel anything in my heart because I no longer craved it. Once I didn't understand why my beloved parents suddenly became so strange. Because I didn't understand, I was unwilling to accept it. The more unwilling I was, the more I wanted to get it back. But after I remembered everything, I suddenly felt that it didn't matter anymore. In this life and the past life, their love for me seemed to turn into a thin layer of ice after Chloe showed up. As long as they heard a few things about my so-called bad deeds towards Chloe, that love was shattered. Just like I still don't understand why in my past life, my brother and Zachary would abandon their dignity and even share a wife just to have Chloe. I still don't understand why my parents have become like this until now. I can only tell myself that they are no longer my loved ones. They have all become puppets. I found a suitable excuse for myself and used this excuse to squeeze out all the grievances in my heart. Only in this way can I live on well. It wasn't until noon that Chloe came back with her eyes and nose red from crying. Zachary accompanied her in. I immediately noticed that there was a new diamond ring on Chloe's hand. I just didn't know if it was a token of their vows yesterday or a love token today. Zachary knelt down directly in front of our whole family. He was full of apologies. He said that he loved Chloe so much that he couldn't control himself yesterday and made a mistake. He would take responsibility. He had already proposed to Chloe before coming here. Chloe was sobbing softly with her head down, looking as if she had been bullied. If it weren't for the inappropriate occasion, I would have cursed and said, "Stop pretending. Wasn't it what you both wanted?" Mom was just crying, and Dad and my brother had gloomy faces and didn't express their opinions. I walked forward and handed Chloe a few tissues, patted her trembling back gently, and said softly, "Don't cry. Mom and Dad don't really mean to blame you. It's just that it was too sudden. When you mentioned Zachary to us before, you always said that you were just friends. Now that it has become like this, of course, everyone can't accept it immediately." Zachary suddenly turned his head and gave me a sharp look. Chloe cried even harder after hearing this sentence, and the astonishment on Zachary's face immediately turned into heartache. I then turned around to persuade Mom and Dad in a low voice. With my mediation as a good sister, they finally calmed down their emotions, and the atmosphere changed from one of interrogation to a family gathering. After several discussions, it was finally decided that the Zachary family should step forward immediately. Although the video news had been dealt with by public relations, the impact still remained. The man's side must come out to clarify that they were an engaged couple, find several good public relations companies, and guide the online public opinion towards the direction of a sweet love story. The engagement banquet must also be held this month and must be done beautifully and grandly so that people outside wouldn't look down on Chloe. Zachary agreed to everything. After the matter was settled, Dad didn't even want to look at Zachary. He directly drove him out of the door and then turned around and went back to the study. Mom took Chloe to the room to talk. Only my brother and I were left in the living room. My brother had been silent since the beginning of the conversation. He would only respond when asked for his opinion. He was sitting on the sofa with his body slightly bent, looking down at his fingers, not knowing what he was thinking. I had been acting all morning and my face was a bit stiff. But whenever I thought of the frustrated looks on the system and the outsiders' faces when the engagement was mentioned, I felt happy. In the previous life, the engagement was held in a very low-key way just to stimulate my brother. They were afraid that it would affect the pursuit of other people later. But now everything was the opposite. The good mood gave me more patience despite my fatigue. I pretended that I just thought my brother couldn't accept that his sister was suddenly getting married and went forward to comfort him. Don't worry. So what if she gets married? We are a family, relatives. Even if she gets married, she's still your sister. Moreover, Zachary is so familiar with our family. He definitely won't treat Chloe badly. I know that you, as a brother, love your sister the most and can't bear to see her suffer any grievance. But since it has already happened, as relatives, we can only comfort her well and minimize the impact. Fortunately, what happened this time is just a small matter of an unmarried couple crossing the line. It won't cause too bad an impact. Otherwise, I'm afraid Chloe and Mom and Dad wouldn't be able to bear the blow. Look at how much she cried just now. She has always been very strong outside and can't bear to be criticized. Each of my words of comfort was reminding him of his relationship with Chloe, making him see clearly how delicate Chloe was and how she couldn't bear the storms, criticism, and how our parents' emotions were affected by this daughter. I saw that his face was getting gloomier and gloomier. When love is blooming, negative emotions are the best fertilizer. But if it's just budding, it's like a heavy stone. Brother, cheer up. Chloe and Zachary love each other so much. We should bless them. I think if I were a snake, when I said this sentence beside my brother's ear, I would definitely stick out my bright red tongue. Hannah also came to the engagement banquet. She was wearing a long white dress with a veil and a pink diamond ring on her hand, looking somewhat like a bride. Jewel. Her makeup was exquisite, but when getting closer, one could still see her tiredness. It seemed that she hadn't slept well for a long time. I thought I would lose to you. She didn't look at me but just stared intently at the figures of Zachary and Chloe holding hands on the high platform. It seemed that she didn't need my response and just went on talking by herself. I know you did it on purpose at the theater that day. You must have planned it and acted it out for me to hear. I don't believe you can't see what kind of person this Chloe is. Your man was snatched away by such a person. Given your personality, even if you fought with them until you were bruised and bleeding, you wouldn't sincerely wish them well, let alone cry outside. After competing with you for so many years, I still understand you in this regard. She smiled when she said this, but she wasn't happy. I also know why you chose me. Just as I understand you, you also know that even if I knew it was a trap, I would definitely jump into it. Her hand with the diamond ring was raised as if waiting for another hand to hold it. The pink diamond ring was Zachary's favorite. Although he was fierce when he grew up, he liked watching some cartoons for little girls when he was a child and was even more obsessed with them than I was. I forgot which cartoon it was, but the little bride in it had a big and shiny pink diamond ring. He remembered it since then and always said that he would also use a pink diamond ring when getting married. Today was his engagement ceremony, but the ring was a sapphire one because Chloe liked sapphires. However, Hannah came with a pink diamond ring. I know what happened to Hannah in her previous life. I was still alive at that time. She didn't give up on Zachary because of Chloe's appearance. She was like a moth flying into the fire, desperately crashing into the light bulb of the incandescent lamp. Finally, because she always opposed Chloe and even wanted to hire someone to kidnap Chloe and ruin her, she completely angered both families. To protect the Hughes enterprise that was being crazily retaliated against by the two families, Hannah's father abandoned Hannah and sacrificed her to calm things down. Hannah's mother tried to stop it like crazy, but it was useless. Because Hannah's father had a beloved mistress and a new son, and without the threat from the two families, he had already designed a deadly trap for the mother and daughter long ago. As for Hannah's twin brother, he finally chose to take part of the property and go overseas to avoid trouble. Hannah's end was very tragic. When Hannah's mother took her away from the Zachary family, she was already out of her mind. Hannah's mother took her to the seaside and jumped into the sea with her. When they were fished out, the mother and daughter were tied together with a rope. Actually, she didn't have to end up like this. Both she and I knew that no matter how much we loved that man, there were some bottom lines that couldn't be crossed. Because a single move could affect the whole situation, the higher one's position was, the more cautious one would be. So over the years, whether it was open or covert struggles, neither of us had really gone all out. It's a pity that in the end, both she and I became gamblers who were so eager to win that we lost our senses under the guidance of the outsiders. Hannah, forget about Zachary. Hannah didn't answer me. The ceremony on the stage had already reached the part of exchanging the 8 characters of birth, a traditional Chinese custom in engagement. Her eyes were red. Hannah's mother in the crowd also had red eyes. Hannah was for a man who didn't love her, and Hannah's mother was for a daughter who didn't love her back. Actually, Hannah's mother didn't need to take risks at first. She could have dealt with that woman in a more secure way, but she was willing to do anything for Hannah. Actually, Hannah didn't know that I had envied her since the previous life. So what if there was no Zachary? She still had someone who loved her so much. If I had had such a person by my side back then, even if I couldn't hear the system's conversations at all, I wouldn't have ended up like that. So before I knew that Zachary and Chloe had already hooked up, I had someone get the pregnancy report of Hannah's father's mistress and anonymously handed it to Hannah's mother. She was a clever hunter. It was just that many victories had made her slack off, but as long as she got a hint in advance, no matter how deeply the prey was buried, she could find it. It seems that the old saying that good people will be rewarded is still reasonable. That little act of kindness has benefited me now. The ceremony on the stage was over, and it was time for me to go on stage to give my blessings to the newly engaged couple. After the engagement ceremony, my ears were filled with the complaints of the system and Chloe. Because when Chloe and Zachary were kissing in the blessings, my brother's favorability towards her dropped by 5%. At a time like this, it was natural to strike while the iron was hot. The next day, I brought another piece of good news to Chloe. My brother was going abroad. The group had a branch overseas, and its business expansion hadn't been going smoothly recently. Dad wanted to send a capable person from the group to handle it. I took the initiative to disclose this news to my brother and encouraged him to fight for this opportunity with Dad, which could also train his ability to handle crises. My brother had already vaguely sensed his feelings for Chloe. This was unforgivable for him. As the adopted son of the Jewel family, he always felt grateful for this kindness. So he had always loved the blood of the Jewel family as a guardian. In the past, it was me, and now it's Chloe. But now he had such rebellious thoughts. The overwhelming panic and self-blame made him restless and thinner these days. And after witnessing the engagement ceremony in person, his mood had fallen to an all-time low. At this time, with a suitable opportunity to avoid the person who made him so flustered, he couldn't wait. Of course, Chloe wouldn't be willing to let him go. Urged by the system, she was eager to find my brother and ask him to stay. I had already expected that she would do this, so I stayed in my brother's room for an extra half an hour last night. During that half an hour, I kept describing to him how happy I was to see Chloe and Zachary so happy and how sincere my happiness for Chloe was. For my brother now, the happier Chloe was, the more he felt that he was in the way. So early in the morning, he went to the airport. Without even saying goodbye to Chloe, he became a loser who fled in the face of love. Chloe cursed in her room for the whole day, and I sat in the living room drinking coffee and listened to her thoughts with great interest. The system had been quiet all along. Chloe called it all day, and it only replied occasionally. System. What's wrong with you? Why are you ignoring me today? I'm so angry. Hurry up and help me think of a way. That damn Hannah. I must kill her. Hurry up and give me some props. Hurry up. Host, with your current points, you can only exchange for a few low-level props. How could this be? Where are my points? Didn't I have thousands of points? Host, you used those points to exchange for modifying your body. I did it to hold on to Zachary. And didn't you always encourage me to exchange more props and make myself more charming so that I could be more attractive? I was also thinking about the host. You've already won over Zachary and the progress with Truett is also going smoothly. Logically, you would win him over. I didn't expect that something like Hannah would suddenly pop up and Truett was so stimulated that he went abroad. The system's voice sounded gloomy. Logically, sounded like a thorn in my ears. Listen, what an arrogant attitude. It seemed that in their eyes, we were all just puppets and we would do whatever they asked us to do. That's right. Round after round of conquest. I'm not sure of the exact English equivalent here, maybe something like pursuing or winning over in a loop. If it were a game for the system, it should be similar to an idle instance. How could it be willing to put in more effort? Then what should we do now, system? Help me think of a way. Or should I also go abroad to find Truett? You've just got engaged. Zachary definitely won't let you go. He will definitely follow you abroad. Truett's favorability dropped and he left as soon as you got engaged. If you two follow him, it might backfire. Alas, I originally thought that being in a favored position would make it easier to win over Truett, so I arranged him as the second target to pursue. Now that it's like this, we can only bring forward the other targets to pursue. Anyway, host, you need to earn more points first to complete the tasks. A new target. Great. Hurry up and introduce it to me. What's he like? I've sent you the information of the new target. Take a good look. It includes all his preferences like what he likes to eat and what color he likes to wear. His name is Miles. His father is an American who deals in arms trafficking and his mother is an opera singer, a Chinese. He's now the general manager of a technology company. On the surface, it's engaged in electronic products, but behind the scenes, it's still involved in some arms deals. He's still abroad now. Originally, I planned to let you get in touch with him when he returned to China in 2 months. But now, it's certain that you need to meet him in advance. Damn it. A half-breed. And with an underworld background. This is so exciting. He's so handsome. His green eyes are really beautiful. System, I think I'm going to fall in love with him. Hurry up and arrange a meeting for me. Either you go on a trip abroad with Zachary. When the time comes, I'll give you his location coordinates, and you can create a chance encounter. Miles. What a long unheard name. Among Chloe's men, apart from Zachary and my brother, he was the third one I had seen when I was alive. He was a man as dirty and vicious as a wild wolf. It was he who arranged for those men to take me away in the middle of the night, humiliate me, and even take videos of me. I'll never forget those disgusting green eyes. I thought I had been able to face the memories of the past calmly, but when I saw Miles again, I realized that I had never been calm. I had just numbed myself briefly with the pleasure of revenge. On that miserable night, I was lying naked on the ground like a piece of garbage. The dark camera lens was like a cold eye, examining my torn-apart soul. Miles was sitting in the corner in the shadows. I couldn't see his face clearly. I could only see his slender fingers tapping on the back of the chair one by one. The dim light faintly reflected his green eyes. It was as if a piece of flesh had been forcibly cut off from me and this scene had been forcibly stuffed in. The foreign body sensation constantly rubbed against the wound, making it hard to heal. I briefly regretted this decision. When I heard the system carefully explaining Miles's past, his preferences to Chloe and persuading Chloe to win him over as soon as possible over and over again, a bold idea came to my mind. I'm going to meet Miles first and make him fall in love with me first. Even if I can't achieve that, I'll make it impossible for him to fall in love with Chloe and prevent him from contributing points. This is the only way for me at present. If I want to defeat the system, I must prevent it from receiving energy. So I came to the United States first. Although I didn't have Miles' exact coordinates, I knew the address of his company. I rented an apartment nearby and pretended to be looking for a job as I wandered around for several consecutive days. Finally, I saw Miles today. However, I overestimated myself. The moment Miles appeared in my sight, anger rushed through me like a rampaging wind that couldn't be stopped no matter what. I actually bit off a small piece of flesh from my mouth. The pain, accompanied by the rusty taste, pushed into my brain, and only then did I manage to calm down a bit. I rushed forward and called out to Miles, who was about to step into the company's entrance. "Miles, do you remember Little Crescent?" Little Crescent was the girl Miles had been looking for all along, and also the identity borrowed by the outsider when they got in touch with Miles in my past life. When I shouted out these 3 words, the expression on Miles' face was like that of a wolf that had been suddenly driven out of its pack. There was confusion, disbelief, and a faint glimmer of expectation in his eyes. I was then taken to Miles' office. It was like a wildlife museum in here, with animal specimens displayed everywhere. I sat on the sofa, with the tiger skin of a white tiger under my feet. Looking straight ahead, there was a golden eagle standing on a withered tree bonsai. Miles stood with his back to me in front of a pair of ivory tusks, not knowing what was on his mind. He hadn't said a word since I uttered that sentence. He just waved his hand at the bodyguards, and they brought me up here. Such a tacit understanding made me couldn't help but wonder how many people they had brought up like this and how many of them had left intact. My palms were sweating. I had seen many big scenes, but facing someone as moody and reckless as Miles, I had to be prepared for the worst at every moment. Suddenly, Miles raised his hand and touched his left ear. I adjusted my line of sight and looked again, and only then did I notice that he was wearing an invisible Bluetooth headset. It seemed that someone was talking to Miles. "Miss Jewel," he suddenly spoke up and turned to look at me. I knew what was being said in that headset. It was my identity information. Less than half an hour had passed since I saw Miles, and these people were really quick. "Mr. Miles," I calmed down, looked into Miles' eyes, and smiled. "It seems that you already know who I am. Then let's be frank with each other." Miles didn't say anything. He walked to the sofa on one side and sat down. "It seems that Miss Jewel knows a lot about my affairs. I wouldn't say I know much. I just happen to know how to settle a regret for Mr. Miles." "Oh? A regret? Miss Jewel might as well tell me about it." Miles narrowed his eyes slightly, raised his arm and put it on the sofa, and his fingers tapped the armrest gently one after another. I knew that when Miles made this gesture, he was considering whether to take action against me, like the fangs bared by a jackal before hunting. This gesture was Miles' hunting signal, a habit he deliberately left behind. "You're looking for a woman. She's Vietnamese and has a name called Little Crescent, which you gave her. Although I don't know what the entanglement between you two is, I know Little Crescent. Actually, I don't know Little Crescent, but I know about your past. When you were 14 years old, you were kidnapped by a criminal gang. Your parents abandoned you for the sake of benefits. A golden boy was forced to abandon his dignity to survive, turning into a dog begging for food and pleasing those kidnappers. You stayed with them for half a year and suffered countless abuses and humiliations before you found a chance to escape. Little Crescent was the child of a Vietnamese man in the gang. She was only 10 years old, just a bit taller than the table, serving her father and those scumbags like a servant. but she was your only comfort. The few sips of hot soup secretly left for you, the old but warm enough clothes, the few words of pleading when you were beaten. The painkillers stolen from the box, and the loose change stuffed under the pillow were like the moonlight shining through the cracks in the wooden roof every night. You called her Little Crescent. It was the first time she had a real name instead of just being an interjection. She was humble and thin, like mud on the roadside that would be washed away by a heavy rain, but she managed to mold herself into a statue of a bodhisattva. This mud bodhisattva secretly saved up travel expenses for you, helped you buy time, and let you escape to find your parents. You were like a vine returning to the big tree. In your innocent green eyes, there was only longing for your parents and hatred for the kidnappers. You wrapped around it again and tried your best to take root. At the age of 19, you strangled the tree you had relied on to death, turned it into ashes, and made it the nutrients under your feet. You were no longer a vine. You grew limbs. You traveled across mountains and rivers to find the people who had turned you into a dog and vented your accumulated hatred on them. You didn't leave a single one alive. You still wanted to find your Little Crescent, but she had already been sold by her father to a passing Mexican man, traded for a roll of banknotes. You've been searching for her whereabouts everywhere these years, but the world is just too big. I know where she is and what happened to her later in life, but I can't guarantee that I can definitely take you to find her, because she's already dead. Section 3. A man like a wild wolf. I learned all these things after I died and followed Chloe around. It was a terrible story pieced together from fragmented words. The little mud bodhisattva didn't wait for someone to ferry her across the river and was trampled to pieces, turning into a pile of mud. But her name was picked up after her death, washed clean, and carried by someone. That person used this name to come to your side and fabricated a false past with the help of the system. She clung to you like a kitten that had finally found its home. When her smile was no longer blurred behind the name, she could find an excuse to reveal her true identity. You hate betrayal the most. You should have burned her at the stake, but your heart had already been captured by her. You couldn't bring yourself to do it. You could only drive her away. She shouted out her love for you at the top of her lungs. You covered your ears, not wanting to be bewitched by her anymore. But she used her life to prove her love for you. When she blocked that bullet for you, you died for the second time. The first time was the night when your parents abandoned you. In the following dozen years, you lived like a flayed ghost, with your body and flesh in a mess. There was only hatred in your heart. This was the second time. You regained the skin that had been stripped off. You finally understood how much you longed for such a person to appear in your life. You changed from a wild wolf back into a tamed dog. But what you didn't know was that when that bullet was fired, its trajectory had already been calculated by the system. A prop was used to choose an angle where you would be injured but not fatally, and the pain was also reduced to the minimum. All that blood on the ground was actually just your pain alone. I know that the current Chloe has also chosen the same identity to approach you, so I'm here to cut off their way. She's already dead. She died 7 years ago. After I said this sentence, Miles grabbed my neck and pushed me down onto the soft carpet. The feeling of suffocation turned into tears that welled up in my eyes. Through my teary eyes, I saw the golden eagle on the withered tree fly up and land beside Miles. Its yellow eyes were like stones, touching my skin with a cold feeling. "You're lying." Miles' voice was hoarse. Those 3 short words seemed to roll out from his cracked flesh and blood, covered with blood foam. It was so painful, as if my throat bone was being crushed. I could hardly breathe, and the blood vessels on my face were about to burst from the strain. I struggled to raise my arm. Instead of trying to pull Miles' hand off my neck, I used all the remaining strength to give Miles a hard slap. The crisp sound made the golden eagle spread its wings again. With a flap, Miles let go of his hand. The fresh air rushed into my body eagerly, making me cough so hard that I almost spat out blood. It took me a long time to calm down. I looked at Miles with tears in my eyes. He was half kneeling on the tiger skin carpet, with a calm expression on his face. That calmness seemed to be stretched by someone pulling his face skin, looking so taut. "Tell the truth, and I won't kill you." When he spoke, his lips moved only slightly, and his voice was very low. He was of mixed race, very pale, abnormally so. The place where I had hit him gradually turned red and swollen. Speak. It was as if someone suddenly threw a stone and shattered a porcelain vase. His calmness shattered so abruptly. He jumped up, took out a gun from behind the ivory display cabinet, strode forward, and pressed the gun hard against my forehead. He pushed so hard that it felt like a blow to my face. I'm telling the truth. My throat, which had been choked, sounded like a broken gong. I had to exert a lot of effort to make a harsh sound. I knew that he didn't disbelieve me. He just couldn't accept it. His gun wasn't on safety. A person who lived on the edge of danger, as long as he touched a gun, wouldn't make this mistake unless he didn't want to kill. As early as when he knew that Little Crescent had been sold, he had actually guessed that she might already be dead, but he didn't want to face it. He had truly turned her into the moon, hanging in the sky like that, out of reach, but he could look up and see it whenever he missed her. Over the years, those who tried to fish in troubled waters for benefits died miserably one after another. So no one dared to casually mention these 3 words in front of him, let alone connect this name with the word dead. Actually, when Chloe showed up, did he really not suspect anything? He was so suspicious. I guess he might have investigated Chloe but couldn't find anything under the system's interference. Even though he had doubts in his heart, he still chose to keep Chloe by his side. His feelings for Little Crescent were neither love nor a sense of regret for wanting to repay a kindness. Little Crescent was the attachment of the little bit of humanity that remained in him. He needed someone like that to exist to remind him that he could be loved. So he was willing to accept the situation as it was, because memories fade, and he needed to refresh them. Miles, cough, cough, cough. I'm not lying to you. I didn't come to you today to exchange this news for any benefits. I didn't come for you. I came for Little Crescent. The pressure of the gun against my forehead gradually eased. I let out a sigh of relief, but in the next second, I saw Miles turn the gun in his hand with one hand, and the butt of the gun came crashing down towards me. Mad dog, he was really a mad dog. When I woke up in the cellar, this was all that was on my mind. I felt deeply annoyed. I had been too presumptuous. Since I remembered the past events, unconsciously, I had also put myself in the same God's eye view as the outsiders, thinking that I knew everything and could plan every step well. I should have been more cautious. The Miles I had seen before was the one who had already put on a collar beside the outsiders. I completely forgot how crazy he could be when he had no scruples. I didn't know how long I had been locked in the cellar. Maybe 1 day, 2 days, or 3 days. There were no windows or clocks in the cellar, so I couldn't accurately judge the time. Only the hunger was slowly stretched out in the darkness. When I was about to be knocked down by the weakness caused by dehydration, Miles came. The moment he walked in against the light, I felt a shiver all over my body. I restrained the impulse to rush towards that light, clenching my teeth so hard that I almost broke them. I knew Miles's intention. Trapping a person in a space without light, food, or water could destroy a person's mind in a short time, just like a deprivation experiment. 3 days have passed. You're really tough. Miles was wearing a pair of leather boots. The hard soles stepped on the gravel floor, and the thumping sound echoed throughout the cellar, like the sound of drums ordering my nerves to stand on end. I've locked up quite a number of people here. There are very few who can be as calm as you. You're the first among women. He was holding a glass bottle in his hand, which was more than half filled with water. The water swayed gently as he walked. I couldn't take my eyes off that bottle of water. It was magnified and elongated in my sight, as if it had turned into a river that was about to drown me, and I couldn't wait. Miles smiled following my gaze. He walked up to me with the water. I really wanted to stand up, but I just didn't have the strength. Leaning against the wall and sitting halfway was already my limit. I saw Miles raise the water bottle in front of me and slowly unscrew the cap. With each turn of the cap, it was as if my sight was being pulled out like silk. When the click sound of the last turn rang out, my mind went blank all of a sudden. I couldn't restrain myself from lunging forward a bit, but then I forced myself to hold back. Instantly, sweat covered my whole body. Oh? Miles raised his eyebrows and smiled even more happily, like a child teasing a butterfly. He raised his hand and poured the water over my head. Every inch of my skin seemed to suddenly grow a mouth, crying and shouting desperately, trying to suck up a drop of water. I bit my tongue hard, and my mouth was filled with a fishy smell. If it had been a stranger who did this today, I probably couldn't have restrained myself from opening my mouth wide and sticking out my tongue to chase after that stream of water. But the one who did this was Miles. When reason was destroyed and only instinct remained, all that was left in me was hatred for him. This hatred was like tape sealing my mouth. When the water bottle was emptied, I heard a wail coming from within my body. Interesting, ha 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 ha. Miss Jewel, you're really interesting. Miles laughed a bit out of control. His green eyes were so intense that they seemed like emeralds about to drip juice. He threw the bottle away, bent down, and grabbed my hair. He must have used a lot of force, but I could hardly feel the pain anymore. He stared at me with his eyes wide open, as if he had discovered a novel toy. Are you really Jewel? That pampered young lady? Aren't you women supposed to be as delicate as flowers? I had a lot of things I wanted to say, but my already injured throat was stuck together because of thirst, and I could only make a hissing sound. If it were an ordinary woman, it might take me some effort to investigate her background. But you socialites are all eager to turn yourselves into display cabinets for jewels. It was very easy for me to find out about your life story. His hand touching my face was very rough, full of calluses. You have an interesting past. According to an old Chinese saying, you're like a civet cat pretending to be the crown prince. I was originally worried that it would be troublesome to deal with if I killed you. But now your relatives are all surrounding the real crown prince. No one really cares about whether you live or die. I couldn't speak. I could only stare fixedly at his eyes. Before wild animals fight, they will stare into each other's eyes. Whoever looks away first will be at a disadvantage. I saw a lot of things in his eyes. Finally, I understood that I had made a wrong move. This guy had already known that Little Crescent Moon was dead. He must have found out something, whether in this life or the previous one. But he just wouldn't admit it. Not only did he not admit it, but when the outsider showed up under the name of Little Crescent Moon, he was like a cat that hadn't seen a mouse for a long time. He just let it be and wanted to see what tricks she had. The physical weakness instead made my mind extremely clear, like a flashback before death. Every time I had seen Miles before flashed through my mind quickly. The appearances were blurry, but his eyes were extremely bright. So bright that I could clearly see every emotion in them. He was different from those men. He wasn't so deeply in love with the outsider that he couldn't extricate himself and thus tolerated her being half-hearted. On the contrary, he didn't love the outsider enough, so he tolerated everything. He didn't care at all why the outsider blocked a bullet for him. All he needed was for someone to block a bullet for him. I even began to suspect that he might have arranged for someone to fire that bullet. Little Crescent Moon could no longer fill the growing emptiness in his heart. He needed new love, a kind of love that could make his walking corpse of a body feel alive. It didn't matter if it was fake. The fake one was more vivid and less likely to fade than the real one. He might not love the outsider. He just loved himself more. He wasn't submitting to the outsider. He was just indulging himself in the illusion of love. Pitiful, so pitiful. He was even more pitiful than those men who begged for love. There was no love left in his heart. I think my pity probably leaked out through my eyes. Miles's face turned cold inch by inch, and his eyes began to be bloodshot. Just when the green in his eyes was about to shatter, I ignored the fact that my hair was still being pulled and leaned forward to kiss him on the lips. Just a light touch like a dragonfly skimming the water. The about to shatter green in his eyes froze. This kiss was disgusting but also satisfying, like dancing on top of hatred. Before passing out, I thought. Even if this move was wrong, I wouldn't lose. The game had just begun. Miles took me out of the cellar and kept me by his side. He didn't ask me why I kissed him, whether I had other motives, or whether I was willing to stay. I didn't explain either why I kissed him, whether I had other motives, or whether I was willing to stay. Little Crescent Moon became a topic that came to an abrupt end. I could feel that the two of us were competing with each other. Although I couldn't tell exactly what we were competing about, I knew that he had the same feeling. I had a serious stomach problem to begin with, and after being starved for so many days, I almost lost half of my life. I received intravenous infusions for several days but still couldn't recover. It felt like my stomach was filled with sulfuric acid. When I was sickly, Chloe and Zachary also arrived in the United States. I had done something before I left. As long as Chloe left the country, I would receive a message. Come to think of it, it had been 2 weeks since I left home on the pretext of traveling to relax. Except for my brother who had contacted me, the rest of the Jewel family hadn't made a single move. I should have felt disappointed about this kind of thing originally, but now I just felt relieved. My brother sent me a greeting message as usual during lunchtime. He had been away for some time. I guessed that Chloe must have sent him messages frequently, expressing her longing and reluctance to part and her expectation for him to come back soon. So whenever I was free, I would also send him messages. Besides sharing the trivialities of life and travel, I mostly told him how sweet Chloe and Zachary were, asking him to rest assured and not worry about Chloe. On one side was sincere longing, and on the other side was conspicuous affection. It was like a saw pulling at my brother's fragile emotional nerves. When I replied to my brother's message, I mentioned that I had come to the United States. The words "typing" on his side appeared and disappeared several times before he finally replied to me. I heard from Chloe that she also went to the United States. Is she with you? No, I didn't know that. She's here too? She should be with Zachary. Since they just got engaged, they probably want to have a little honeymoon. There was no reply from him after that, but I took advantage of his message to contact Chloe openly and made an appointment to meet her. The bruises on my neck from being pinched hadn't disappeared yet. I covered them with concealer for special effects makeup, put on a silk scarf, swallowed a handful of painkillers, put on a makeup that made me look more energetic, and carefully checked myself in the mirror before I went out at ease. I was now living in Miles's villa. Probably due to the influence of Little Crescent Moon, this villa had an air of Southeast Asia everywhere. The garden was full of tropical plants. Miles was standing under a palm tree. A chubby white male was kneeling in front of him, kissing his shoes and begging Miles to spare his life. Miles was peeling an apple with a dagger in his hand, staring at the man with a smile. It was blatant teasing. The longer I stayed by his side, the more I felt that he was a pervert. I could have gone out from the other side, but when I saw that he was there, I walked along the path in the garden. Miles saw me but didn't ask where I was going. He just raised the dagger at the bodyguard. The bodyguard then dragged the begging man and forced him to raise his neck. While the man was crying heartbreakingly, Miles cut his throat with the dagger. It wasn't as smooth as in the movies. There were muscle fibers and cartilage in the neck. It was more like sawing than cutting. Blood spurted out and splashed all over Miles. Most of his face was covered with blood. The man didn't die immediately and twitched like a fish. I hadn't seen what it was like to slaughter a pig, but I guessed it was probably similar. In my eyes, Miles was even worse than those butchers. I wasn't afraid. I just found him disgusting. This was the second person he had killed in the garden right in front of me. I even suspected that the garden was full of buried bodies, which was why the flowers grew so luxuriantly. I knew that Miles had been watching me all the time. The man bled a lot, and the blood snaked along like a red snake crawling out of the turf. I lifted my high heels and stepped over that red snake, walked out of the garden through the smell of blood. I walked a long way before I got rid of the strange feeling brought by Miles's gaze. It was like being licked by a wolf with blood foaming at its mouth. I went to the hotel where Chloe was staying and waited for her. Before she arrived, I first heard the system's voice host, "What does this Jewel want to see you for?" Probably she came to check it out after hearing what my brother said. I don't believe that she doesn't love Zachary just because she said so. Didn't you see how ugly her face was when Zachary knelt down in the Jewel family? She still forced herself to act gentle and considerate. I'm not like those people in the Jewel family who would be deceived by her and think that she had really changed her nature. I feel that she's a bit strange, but it doesn't matter. After all, it's impossible for everything to be exactly the same every time. As long as the general direction is right, it'll be okay. The system's voice was a bit vague towards the end. Huh? Every time? Has this world task been done many times? Aren't there many small worlds? After we complete this world, don't we still have to go to other worlds? It's nothing. I was just thinking about Jewel. Don't think too much. She's not a threat at all. If you care so much about her, just give me a prop and I'll get rid of her directly. This definitely won't work, host. She's a main character in this small world. We can guide changes in her life path and make her move towards self-destruction, but we can't directly get rid of her. Otherwise, it will affect the whole small world, alright. How troublesome. It doesn't matter, host. Jewel is just a supporting character. It's not a big deal. Moreover, Zachary is yours now, and the people in the Jewel family don't really care about her that much. We can deal with her slowly. The most important thing now is to work hard on the conquest and exchange for points. Although there's been a little trouble with Truett, the favorability is already quite high. We just need to make one more effort and we can win him over. Let's deal with Miles here, accumulate some points, and then go to conquer him. So you can't directly get rid of me. This is the best news I've heard in such a long time. It's so good that when I saw Chloe, the smile on my face was full of sincere joy. She was putting on an act and chatting with me casually. Without anyone else around, her attitude was extremely perfunctory. I could see the disdain in her eyes. I probably knew what I looked like in her eyes. A young lady who was originally full of pride, willing to become docile and obedient for wealth, status, and always endured everything, and had to watch the man she loved being taken away by her. Even though she was clearly in pain, she still gritted her teeth and gave her blessings. Although they had tried several times to provoke my anger and wanted me to get into a fight with her, they didn't succeed. But my cautious attitude made them feel the pleasure of trampling me underfoot to a large extent, so naturally they also looked down on me. What's more, I had always been secretly avoiding their tricks. What I did with my brother was also taking advantage of the situation, like boiling a frog in warm water, without causing any big waves. The only time I took the initiative was by borrowing Hannah's hand. So up to now, in their eyes, I'm just an obstacle rather than a rival. But the situation is different now. I got close to Miles, and it's no longer something done secretly. If they find out, they will definitely suspect me. So the purpose of my coming here today was to find out what the system would do if it found something wrong with me. However, before I had time to do anything, they spilled everything out. I listened as Chloe seemingly casually mentioned Zachary's love for her and made myself put on a forced smile at the right time. Chloe was satisfied, and so was I. I left without seeing Zachary. If it were 2 months ago, I would definitely have found a chance to take a look at him. But it's different now. Now when I think of the 20 years I spent with him, it seems as vague as a movie I've watched. I could see the joys, sorrows, laughter, and anger, but I couldn't remember what that feeling was like anymore. In the past, I pursued love until I was bruised and battered. Now I understand that so-called love is about not seeing through it. Once you see through it, that person is just an ordinary man. On my way back, I initiated the plan that I had already prepared and quietly spread the net. After everything was arranged, I returned to Miles. He seemed to be very idle every day and stayed in the villa all the time. When I entered the door, he was tanning in antelope skin, and the living room was in a mess. Back already? How was it? Were you happy to see your old love's new sweetheart? I knew he would have someone follow me. Are you that bored? Don't you need to go to the company every day? I walked over and poured myself a glass of warm water. My throat hadn't recovered yet. After chatting with Chloe for a few sentences today, it started to hurt again. Yeah, I'm terribly bored. The way he touched the fur was like stroking a woman's skin. If he didn't have such a good appearance, his behavior would be as wretched as it could be. You really like that man? If I were you, I'd just kill that woman, take the man back, and kill all the people in your family too. Then I'd hold all the property in my hands and do whatever I wanted. I took off my high heels, held the water glass in one hand, and sat on the sofa. There was a large fur blanket on it, and it was so soft that I couldn't help narrowing my eyes. Miles, do you only know how to solve problems with violence? Miles turned his head. He was too much like a wild beast, with the primitive innocence of an animal in his cruelty. Violence is the fastest way to solve problems, isn't it? Yeah, and it's also the fastest way to die. You're still afraid of death? Probably because he grew up abroad. Although Miles' Chinese was good, there was a strange, mellow elongation in his tone. Mixed with the rustling sound of the fur being rubbed, it had a hypnotic effect. I twirled the glass in my hand, leaned back on the sofa, and closed my eyes. The soreness in my stomach made me feel very tired. Being afraid of death and not seeking death are two different things, Miles. Not many people are as eager to die as you are. Oh? Then I'll kill you right now. Suddenly, there was a cool feeling on my neck. It was the texture of metal. I didn't even need to open my eyes to guess what Miles was doing. You're really boring. Yeah, that's why I'm keeping you around for fun. If you don't amuse me, I'll kill you. Well, the last time I heard similar words was from two children. They said if you don't give me toys, I'll hit you. Sometimes I really doubt whether Miles is trapped in his 14th year. He can't grow up and can only go crazy. Miles, you could just tell me directly. Just tell me what you want. Do you want someone to have dinner with you? Do you want someone to take a walk with you? Many things aren't that hard to get as long as you say them out loud. The coldness on my neck got closer, but Miles didn't say anything. But I knew Miles would understand what I meant. That day in the cellar, I saw everything clearly in his eyes, and he also knew from my eyes what I had seen. So he had been provoking and testing me these days. If it were an outsider, they would probably have already poured out love and pity in the name of redemption. It was as if what they were facing was not a brutal and murderous pervert at all, but a child who lacked love, had suffered misfortunes, and hid under the bed, tearing the ears of a teddy bear to vent. But I won't do that. It's not just because Miles and I both know each other's true intentions and can't act blindly like the outsiders. It's because even without old grudges, I could never accept someone like Miles. Although I always repay every grudge, I won't use emotional trauma as an excuse to do evil and hurt the innocent. People who do that are cowards. They can't bear the pain in their hearts, are distorted by emotions, and choose to vent their pain on innocent people, hoping to fill the emptiness in their hearts with the flesh and blood of others. But the more flesh and blood piles up, the faster it melts away. So I won't hold Miles' face like the outsiders and say how much I pity him. That's a way to tame a dog. I want to tame a wolf. Miles. I opened my eyes and called his name. Miles was bending over, propping himself up with one arm, and his outstretched arm trapped me on the sofa. If it weren't for the sharp skinning knife in his other hand pressed against my neck, this would be an intimate signal. Let's have mutton for dinner tonight. It's our first time having dinner together. Have it prepared nicely. Jewel, you really dare to tell me what to do? Do you really think I won't kill you? I don't think so. I'm just not afraid of death, so I came to approach you. Miles' face was very close to mine. I could almost feel his warm breath on my lips. In his green eyes, I saw my smiling face. You should have already investigated clearly. Before I came to the United States, I collected a lot of information about you and even deliberately collected information about Little Crescent as a stepping stone to approach you. Don't you want to know why I went to so much trouble to approach you? Do you think I haven't met women like you before? Is the next step for you to tell me that you're in love with me? If you need me to, I can tell you that. I raised my finger and scratched my nails on Miles' throat, leaving red marks one after another. The knife that Miles pressed against my neck didn't move at all. Miles, put the knife down. Only children will scare others with weapons. Roast the mutton a bit tender, and I'll tell you what I really want to do. Screech. Screech. The fork in Miles' hand scraped across the plate again and again. The sound was like nails scratching on a blackboard, making my skin crawl. Miles, don't use the knife and fork to scrape the plate. It's so noisy. If you're not used to using knife and fork, you can also use chopsticks. You're half Chinese, so you should know how to use them. Miss Jewel, aren't you noble ladies the ones who pay the most attention to table manners? You're actually asking me to use chopsticks when eating Western food? Miles was swirling the knife and fork on the plate and looking at me sideways. I was really fed up with his childish and neurotic behavior. Firstly, table manners are behaviors that show respect to the people you're having dinner with. I don't think there's a clear definition for this. Finishing a meal properly and not making impolite gestures is also a form of respect. Obviously, what you did just now wasn't. Secondly, food is meant to serve people, not the other way around. As long as you find it convenient to use something to eat, it's your personal freedom to use whatever utensils. At this point, I couldn't help sighing. I'm hungry, so I want to fill my stomach first before talking about serious matters with you. If you can't wait, you can just tell me directly. Please don't disturb me with these actions, okay? Miles smiled without saying a word and put down the knife and fork. What a pity for this plate of excellent lamb chops. I put down my knife and fork, took off the napkin, and ended this dinner. Alright, then let's start talking about serious matters now. The reason I came to you is very simple. My sister Chloe wants to get close to you. Although I don't know what her purpose is for approaching you, I always have to disrupt her plan. Oh? You want to get rid of her and then take that Zachary guy back. His name is Zachary. I have nothing to do with him anymore. Please don't involve us together. I'm doing this for my own sake. Anyway, I know Chloe intends to take on the identity of Little Crescent to approach you, so I came to you first, planning to pretend that I knew Little Crescent and owed her a favor, and came to tell you the news of her death to repay the favor. Miles crossed his two hands and put them under his chin, listening with great interest as if he were listening to a fairy tale, but the words he said were really unpleasant. Oh, I got it. Both of you sisters want to use me, and you're even using my little crescent moon to use me. Are you seeking death? I hate it the most when others use me. And what makes you think you can deceive me? Do you think I'm a fool? Miles's words made me a bit embarrassed. Because I could hear the system's conversations and had memories of the past, I unconsciously developed a sense of complacency that I could take the initiative, so I impulsively made this plan. It's impossible for Miles to reach his current position just by being ruthless. I took it too much for granted. I even thought that if the outsider could deceive him, why couldn't I? I've already deeply reflected on myself these days. I was being hasty on my own, so I've been punished too, haven't I? You're telling me this. Don't tell me you want me to help you deal with your sister. Why should I? I'm not asking you to deal with her. I'm just telling you about this matter. Aren't you bored? I'm finding some fun for you. And since you hate being deceived, there's no reason to only punish me. Miles didn't reply. He rolled his eyes, picked up the fork beside the plate, and stabbed it into the wine glass beside him. The fork stirred the ice balls inside, making the glass jingle. After stirring it twice, he stabbed the fork hard into the ice balls, splitting the somewhat melted ice balls into several pieces, and some ice chips splashed out. He threw the fork away, stuck his fingers into the glass and grabbed a few pieces of broken ice. His fingers were long and beautiful. Wet with the wine, they seemed to shine under the light. He pinched the ice cubes and put them into his mouth, crunching them loudly. Most of the time, I couldn't understand what Miles was doing at all. But it didn't matter. He was such a pervert. It was normal that I couldn't understand him. All I needed was for him to understand what I said. Fun? Miles rubbed his lips with his wet fingers, narrowed his green eyes and laughed twice. I think you're just making things easier for yourself. You want me to deal with your trouble for you. I won't do it. But she will definitely come to approach you. Although I don't know what her purpose is, I think you shouldn't be able to tolerate someone with ulterior motives by your side, right? Then I'll kill her. Miles elongated his voice. Do you want me to say that? Or do you want to stir up my rebellious spirit? The more you ask me to deal with her, the less I'll pay attention to her. I didn't think so. I'm telling you these things just because things have developed to this point. Since you've investigated me so clearly, when Chloe approaches you, it's hard for you not to think of me. I don't want to get myself into trouble, so I'm just making things clear with you in advance. Oh, I think your sister is quite good looking. Since she throws herself into my arms, why should I refuse? What happens between you and that woman is your freedom. I've already said that this is just a bit of fun I found for you. What you'll do about it is your business. That's all I wanted to say. Since dinner is over, I'll go upstairs and rest first. Before I walked out of the dining room, I heard the sound of plates and dishes breaking behind me. Probably Miles was throwing a tantrum by pulling the tablecloth. I ignored him and went upstairs back to my room. I meant what I said to Miles. On my way back today, I carefully sorted out all the possibilities that could happen between the outsider and Miles. Suddenly, I found that Miles was much easier to deal with than men like my brother and Zachary. The main reason why he fell in love with the outsider was coincidence. He happened to need a new little crescent moon to save his increasingly empty soul, and then the outsider appeared. Moreover, with the help of the system, she knew all of Miles's preferences and past, and wove a golden dream net according to his likes to trap Miles and make him indulge in it. I didn't need to deliberately break up the outsider and Miles at all. All I needed to do was to make Miles only look at me and let Miles know that I was better than that woman in every aspect. Some crying children need candies to calm down, while others need a stern look. 5 days after that dinner, Chloe came to find Miles. When it came to being crazy, Miles was really crazy. After I said those words, Miles found a necklace-shaped camera and wore it around his neck every day. The pictures it recorded would be connected and projected onto my mobile phone through something like a mobile phone adapter, similar to a card reader. He said that a good show couldn't be watched by him alone. It would be interesting only if everyone shared it. Then for several days in a row, I watched Miles beat this one and kick that one like a mad dog. When he went to the company, it wasn't like going to work but more like going to practice free combat. He wouldn't even take off the necklace when going to the toilet or taking a shower. I had no doubt that if he went to bed with Chloe, he might place the necklace at the best angle on the bedside. When Chloe finally appeared in front of Miles, I actually felt a sense of relief. She was wearing a yellow silk dress, and a lotus flower was embroidered on the hem of the skirt with invisible threads. The yellow silk dress was what Miles liked because his mother liked wearing such dresses when she was young. Regardless of what happened later, childhood memories were always profound. Especially for men. In a sense, men's longing for women was built on the image of their mothers. The lotus was the national flower of Vietnam and also the flower that little Crescent Moon had always been talking about wanting to see if she had the chance. She came prepared. I watched as she sat at the table opposite Miles. Her face was fair, her round and bright eyes looked at Miles with a hesitant expression as if she wanted to say something but held back. Her eyelashes were trembling like the wings of a frightened butterfly. She kept biting her pink lips, and the coffee in her hand was stirred into a mess. She almost had the words, "something fishy," written all over her face. Under our gaze, Chloe played out the emotions of surprise, joy, hesitation, loss, and excitement one by one. Then she took a deep breath as if she had made up her mind and got up and walked towards Miles. Her 2 hands were tightly clenched into fists and pressed against her hips. She moved in small steps, her eyes fixed on Miles, wide open, and her voice was sweet. "Are you, the Golden Boy?" The Golden Boy was the exclusive name for little Crescent Moon in those dark days. Because Miles, who was fair and handsome, always reminded little Crescent Moon of the Golden Boy serving the bodhisattva that she had seen once. Although I couldn't see Miles's face, I could tell from his voice that he had made a very cooperative emotional response. "It's really you." Chloe's eyes were red with surprise, and she bit her lips tightly. She tilted her head to look at Miles with a somewhat aggrieved look. Her hands were at a loss, as if she wanted to give Miles a hug but was afraid that it was just a dream. Her skin was as white and smooth as snow, with voluptuous curves flowing, exuding a faint fragrance. On her palm-sized round face, there was a round nose and plump lips. But she had a pair of slightly drooping big eyes with black and large pupils, shining brightly. When she lowered her eyes, she exuded an alluring sensuality. When she raised her eyes, she was as innocent as a pile of snow in the mountain valley. One was afraid to sully this purity even with an extra breath. Although this woman was vain and greedy, since she was alive, she had been making a living by flirting with various men, so she knew best what kind of woman was the hardest for men to resist. Under the transformation of various props, although it was still the same face, even when she made a stubborn expression now, it was a half-hearted and innocent look. There was no trace of Chloe's former pride left. With this cute and innocent body, she expressed her years of longing in front of Miles and fabricated a past that was half true and half false. She was bought by a Mexican man, found a chance to escape on the way, wandered for a long time and suffered a lot. Finally, she was adopted by a kind Chinese couple, but unfortunately they had passed away. After she dealt with their funerals, she had nowhere to go, so she came to New York to look for new opportunities, and then happened to meet the boy she had never forgotten in her childhood in a coffee shop. It was the beginning of a romantic love story. It's a pity that through the camera, I couldn't hear the systems and Chloe's inner thoughts. I always felt that something was missing. Miles was very distressed after hearing about her experiences. When he knew that she didn't even have a place to stay when she first arrived in New York, he immediately offered to take her home and settle her down. This was beyond my expectation. I originally thought that Chloe came to the United States with Zachary. Although she would try every means to approach Miles, she shouldn't have directly left Zachary aside. As a result, she directly hinted to Miles that she needed a place to rely on. As for Miles directly wanting to take her back to the villa, he must have deliberately wanted to see me get anxious. I could even imagine his look of enjoying the show and hoping for more trouble. I put my mobile phone in my pocket. While paying attention to the conversation between the two and my Bluetooth earphone, I went to find the nanny. All the servants in this manor were terribly afraid of Miles. It was said that there was an disobedient gardener buried in the flower bed. As soon as Miles's name was mentioned, they would immediately be on full alert. Taking advantage of the time before Miles got home, I asked the servants to pack all my things into the basement and clean up all the traces of my life, making room for Miles's new love. The basement was hidden by a mechanism in an inconspicuous wall. I don't know how it was built. As long as you stayed in this room, you could hear the sounds in all the rooms. When I first moved in, I had already carefully explored the whole manor under the pretext of getting familiar with the environment. After discovering this basement, I found an opportunity to make a key, and it came in handy today. When I heard Chloe's voice ringing in the house, a sense of pleasure of hiding in the dark and spying on the enemy made my whole body tingle. It was like hunting. You had to hide in the dark first to observe the prey and find the best opportunity to deliver a fatal blow. I hid in the dim basement. When I heard Chloe's clear but somewhat distorted voice ringing in my ears, my mind was full of this thought. Chloe was really good at dealing with men. The feeling of being vulnerable and wanting to seek support in her words was grasped very delicately. It was like a thin mist surrounding you. It seemed that you could see it, but it also seemed that you were just being overly suspicious. This kind of intelligence in romantic relationships is an inborn talent. No wonder she was chosen by the system. I stayed in the basement for 4 hours before Chloe reluctantly parted from Miles and went back to her room to rest. I wasn't surprised by the hurried footsteps outside the basement. I didn't avoid the servants when I was packing up. Did you enjoy listening? When Miles opened the door, he would always stick a small part of his face in first, turning his eyes like a snake and quickly scanning the environment in the room. Only after confirming that it was okay would he come in. He was as cautious as a wanted criminal who was being hunted down every day. Yeah, you behaved like a gentleman. I wasn't surprised by Miles' calm and natural reaction. He had always been suspicious. So when I secretly went to make an impression of the basement key while he was taking a nap, I knew he must be pretending to be asleep. So when I left, I knocked on the table twice and saw the corner of his mouth curl up slightly. It was quite easy to figure out Miles' thoughts on some trivial matters. No wonder your man was taken away. That woman is more charming to men than you are. When Miles walked closer, I noticed that there was a light pink, shiny mark on the side of his shirt near his waist. Like the mark of lip gloss. I seemed to guess where that delicate exclamation and apology I heard came from. Miles pulled up that part of his shirt, revealing a small section of his waist which was so white that it seemed to shine in the dim light. That woman bent down to pick something up, but then pretended to lose her balance and was about to fall. I reached out to catch her, and she happened to kiss me on the side of my waist. Her breasts pressed against my thigh, and before they really pressed down firmly, she jumped up and apologized like a boiled red shrimp. 21. Miles tilted his head and his eyes kept moving around. His tone sounded excited and he grinned a silent laugh. She had perfect timing, just like heating milk in the microwave. With a ding, it didn't seem deliberate and seducing, but it would make a man's heart itch. I told you before, she'll be good fun. By the way, what did you have for dinner? I'm a bit hungry too. Let me have a reference. Didn't you see? Miles' face immediately turned cold and even looked a bit gloomy. You didn't look. These 3 words seemed to be spat out by him after being chewed up. No signal. Before he could get even more irritable, I took out the snowy video screen on my phone and showed it to him. Your camera isn't connected to the internet. Its connection method is special and old-fashioned. It's always easy to be interfered with, especially in the basement. Oh. Miles blinked his eyes and became happy again. Since it's not working well, I'll change it for you. I just kept this one because it was something new at first. No need. I like this camera very much. You can keep it. Later, ask someone to see if they can do something to the basement to strengthen the signal connection. I smiled at Miles. Miles tilted his head and didn't refuse. He took out a ball of plastic wrap from his trouser pocket, peeled it open like peeling a banana. Inside was aluminum foil, and when he peeled off another layer, there were small pieces of Wellington steak. Eat it. I've been given a lot of things by men in my life, but I really didn't expect that one day someone would hold this and offer it to me. I suspected that it was the leftovers. It's not leftovers. I didn't eat it. I just cut it. Miles pushed his hand forward a bit and said again, didn't you say that food is meant to serve people? This isn't dirty. It's normal food packaging. Why don't you eat it? His eyes widened slightly, and the innocence in them was so real that I couldn't tell whether he was doing it on purpose or just doing something that I didn't understand again. I've just never eaten steak like this before. I'm a bit surprised. I reached out, took it, pinched off a small piece and ate it. The meat was a bit cold. Miles smiled so much that his eyes were narrowed into slits. How do you plan to deal with that woman? I'm not going to deal with her. I just want to observe and see what she's really up to. What about you? What are you planning to do? She's kind of interesting. I'll keep her for now. She seems to know me very well. I don't know where she got so much information from. Miles stroked his chin, as if recalling the details of getting along with Chloe. I could feel Miles' excitement today. He had a new toy. I didn't need to interrupt much. I just needed to cater to his excitement. If Chloe was the toy, then I had to be the person who could accompany Miles to play with the toy. My fear and hatred for Miles were temporarily pushed aside by me and hidden deep in my soul. It wasn't time to release them yet. Miles made a fuss for quite a while before he left. Before leaving, he said that he would ask someone to adjust the signal tomorrow. The basement finally became quiet, and I could listen carefully to the conversation between Chloe and the system. I had been able to hear them again ever since she came to the manor. It's just that because Miles was with me, they had only communicated a few sentences. After returning to her room, she had been chatting non-stop with the system, and Miles had also been chattering in front of me. Both of my ears were occupied, as if I had come to a forest in summer with cicadas all over the trees. System, what's going on with this Miles? His favorability towards me suddenly rose to 30% just now, but why has it dropped to 0% now? What's the deal with him? Can I get any points? No, host. Miles has a special personality, so it's normal for his favorability to fluctuate. Unless his favorability remains stable without dropping for more than 3 days, it won't be counted as points. What the hell? It's so inexplicable. It's so annoying. By the way, I asked you to keep an eye on Zachary for me. How's he doing? Based on the coordinates, Zachary should have stayed in the apartment all day today, host. I have to remind you that although I've tampered with the footage of the pinhole camera in this room, Miles is very suspicious. We must be on high alert. So I suggest that you don't contact Zachary easily while you're in the manor. I got it. Miles is such a voyeur. He actually installed a pinhole camera in the room. Don't worry. This time, under the pretext of accompanying Jewel, I've already told him that Jewel is suffering from depression now. To avoid stimulating Jewel, I asked him not to contact me on his own initiative unless I reached out to him. It's really lucky that my brother provided me with this information, giving me a good excuse. If Jewel doesn't admit this in the future, it'll also give me a chance to put her down. By the way, system, has Jewel's position changed? No, she's still moving around near her previous position. She should be living there. There's nothing special. I'll keep an eye on it. That's good. Alas, system, you said that if it were the time when I was with Zachary at the homestay, it would be nice if you could help me block the signal or keep a lookout for me. Then I wouldn't have had to announce it so quickly, and my brother wouldn't have gone abroad. Although I've been trying to communicate with him and develop our relationship every day now, his favorability has just been fluctuating by 3 or 4 points up and down. It's driving me crazy. When the host is engaged in adult activities, our system will automatically go into a dormant state. I've already told the host about this before. Host, don't be impatient. Although Miles' favorability fluctuates greatly, it also rises quickly when it does. As long as we grasp the trick, we can win him over in no time. Then we can go to conquer Truett. During these days, we just need to keep Truett stable. You're right. This Miles. They were still chattering over there, but I was a bit dazed. So the system had been monitoring my coordinates all this time? I thought they could only check the coordinates of the targets of the conquest. But they hadn't even discovered that my coordinates were beside Miles. Why? Was it that they monitored it wrong? The system is so powerful that it shouldn't make such a low-level mistake. Could it be that the system is declining because it hasn't received any points? No. It doesn't seem like it. Although the system cares a lot about the number of points, the current system isn't in a hurry. Analyzing from the previous conversations, although the system seems amiable on the surface, it still can't hide its inner arrogance. Its humble attitude is just put on to gain the trust of the outsiders better. It has been creating an atmosphere for the outsiders that as long as it's there, nothing will be a problem. This approach is probably to make the outsiders lose their ability to think independently and rely on the convenience provided by the system everywhere, which makes it easier for the system to control them. So compared to the outsiders' impatience, it's still unhurried and even has the mood to comfort the outsiders. So it definitely hasn't reached the point of declining and making mistakes. Could it be that the system has secretly discovered that something is wrong with my coordinates but deliberately concealed it to stabilize the outsiders? No, if we guess like this, it's also wrong. The outsiders are the hands extended by the system. If it really discovers something, it will definitely let the outsiders come to deal with me first. So there are only 2 possibilities. Either they really didn't discover it, but why didn't they? The system doesn't make mistakes for no reason. There must be some error that I haven't noticed. Or they've already discovered everything knowing that I can hear their inner thoughts but deliberately pretending to know nothing to paralyze me. Then every word they're saying now might be deliberately said for me to hear, deliberately trying to mislead me. Which possibility could it be? I kept guessing all kinds of possibilities over and over again. I thought about it all night but still couldn't figure it out. I could only suppress this doubt for now and continue to observe their movements. Chloe was very enthusiastic about seducing Miles. She not only took over the nanny's job and cooked for Miles every day but also whenever Miles went out, no matter what time it was, she would wait in the living room and greet him with a bright smile and a "welcome home" at the first moment. She was trying hard to create a warm family atmosphere for Miles, trying to make Miles feel the taste of being cared about. Miles was enjoying it. But this enjoyment wasn't about enjoying Chloe's love. It was about enjoying the pleasure of watching a good show. He even said meanly in front of me that Chloe was like a third-rate actor on the stage, with a vigorous vitality of desperately trying to become famous all over her body, and it was really fun. He was biting on a candy cane when he said this, making a crunching sound. Since the day of the Wellington steak, Miles seemed to have found fun. Every time he came, he would take out all kinds of food from his pocket. The candy cane tonight was already normal. At noon, it was a piece of cake that he had carefully pressed into a square and flat shape. I really wouldn't want to touch any of the food if it weren't neatly wrapped. Aren't you afraid of getting moldy staying in this basement all day long? You're just like a rat in the gutter. Miles had a candy in his mouth full of saliva, and his speech was slurred. I think it's okay. But you, the person you met this afternoon was a business partner, right? Even if your technology company is just a front business, you should at least keep up appearances. I can't believe you beat up the business partner. I didn't beat him up. I was just teaching him how to talk properly. Miles was haughty. I couldn't help but sigh in my heart. That business partner was indeed an arrogant man and had been nitpicking since they met. But generally speaking, a normal person would either endure it or refuse to cooperate with such a rude person. Not many people would do what Miles did. He kicked the man, along with the chair, and kicked him around like a ball. Finally, he forced the business partner to eat the contract. That man with a bruised face and swollen eyes probably cried even more aggrievedly than when he was born. What the pinhole camera in Chloe's room recorded was really boring. She's just like a fake doll. She maintains her elegance and beauty all the time even when she's alone. She even holds back half of her sneeze. It's so dull. Miles suddenly brought up a new topic. You said she's desperate to be popular. She must be very dedicated. Miles snapped the candy with a crisp sound, just like breaking a bone. He chewed loudly, like a child throwing a tantrum, but when he spoke, it seemed like he was smiling. I knew you deliberately put the tissue box in that position when you lived in her room before, Jewel. What did you usually do in the Jewel family? Isn't the Jewel family harmonious? Do you also have that kind of scheming and backstabbing? There's no scheming or backstabbing, and I didn't do anything special. I'm just smart. There are many things I don't know how to do, but I can look them up online. There's everything on the internet, isn't there? I can always learn by looking a bit more. While coaxing Miles, I also had to pay attention to the discussions coming from Chloe's room. One moment she was telling the system that she missed Zachary, and the next moment she started chanting Miles's name. I could tell they were anxious just from their voices. Chloe had been by Miles's side for 2 weeks and had tried every trick in the book, but the favorability rating had been fluctuating all the time. It was 60% at noon today and now it's dropped to 20%. Listening to them discussing various countermeasures, I couldn't help but find it funny. They clearly had all the detailed information about Miles from childhood to adulthood and had been with him for so many days. Didn't they see the naughty and unruly nature in Miles's bones? His feelings had long been broken into pieces. All those ratings were just his emotional games. If he thought this toy was interesting, he would create a feeling of liking it on his own and the rating could easily go up to 100%. If he thought it was boring, the false feelings he created would disappear in a puff of wind, gone just like that. In the past, it was because the outsider was the only toy that could arouse his interest, so he indulged her. But this time, you don't have that chance. It's just that you probably don't even realize this problem at all. After observing for so long, setting aside the question of whether the system really noticed something unusual and was misleading me, these outsiders and the system have all made the mistake I made before. Because they know too much, they subconsciously put themselves in too high a position. People who like to look down on others from a height are always prone to making stupid mistakes. Not to mention that they hold the power that they think makes them gods. How could they really put in enough effort? I heard them finalize a new plan. What a great plan. It just gives me a chance to test whether you've actually discovered my spying and are sending me false information. Miles, who was sitting on the carpet with his legs bent, was unwrapping a new candy. His messy head was right by the edge of the sofa. I could touch it with just a stretch of my hand. Hearing my voice, he raised his head. The hand I raised happened to land on his forehead. I smoothed his messy hair on his forehead and tapped his smooth face twice with my fingertips. Do you want to make this fun even more exciting? I had been staying in that basement all along. Finally being able to come out and soak up some sun was really comfortable. It would be even better if there wasn't the stuffy feeling from the thick makeup on my face. I was still thinking about how to witness the good show that was about to happen when Miles found me a great helper. A professional special effects makeup artist. Dyeing hair, colored contact lenses, muscle suits that change the curves of the body, shaving off eyebrows and drawing new ones that visually change the direction of the brow bone. Lip suction devices that can maintain a plump lip effect for 3 days, carefully crafted makeup and outfits, and then putting on a pair of flat and long black-framed glasses. In just half a day, I could be transformed into a typical Asian American secretary of Truett. So in the past few days, I left the manor. Every morning after putting on makeup, I followed Miles as his subordinate. After just a few days, Chloe couldn't sit still and accompanied Miles to the company as well. She was like a very sweet and creamy white cake, sticking to Miles's side. Her curious eyes were looking around wherever she went, and she was asking all kinds of questions in a low voice. Miles was unusually dressed neatly and refreshingly today. He wore a navy blue business suit and had a small ponytail. Usually, he would either wear a pair of jeans with the hem of his white shirt tucked into a black belt and 2 buttons of the shirt undone, showing a patch of fair collarbone with the loose arc of the shirt, or he would wear the same black suit pants and a messy floral shirt, like a leopard print shirt. His hair was long, reaching his shoulders and flowing loose. Being of mixed race, he was very fair, had a striking appearance, a thin layer of muscles with a slender waist and long legs. Among a group of tall and burly white people, he looked a bit thin. He really looked like the top stripper who had run out of some club. No wonder a bald man had misunderstood before and came up to flirt with him. Unexpectedly, such a pretty boy fought like a mad dog. He managed to stab the cake fork into the bald man's eye even with the bald man's bodyguards trying to stop him. I rarely got distracted. When I came to my senses again, I had already followed the 2 people in front of me to the office. Chloe obviously wanted to be alone with Miles. She pulled the corner of Miles's coat and gently shook it twice, her cheeks blushing pink. She looked at me then at Miles, biting her lip and smiling shyly. Miles gently patted her hand then turned to me and said, "I want some coffee." There was a hand-operated coffee grinder in Miles's office. I had seen Miles's subordinates grinding coffee in the office for a whole day many times through the camera on the necklace. When Miles was happy, he would take a sip, and when he wasn't, he would pour it down the toilet. I familiarly found the coffee beans and the coffee machine in the cabinet beside the withered branch. That golden eagle was standing on the branch again, pretending to be dead. Chloe was cursing in her heart but speaking gently with her mouth. I suddenly remembered the new nickname Miles gave Chloe a few days ago, which was Softy. Her body was soft and she would fall over easily. Her voice was soft, and she looked soft too. She was soft everywhere, and now she was being soft and coquettish. She told Miles that she saw online that there was an animal farm nearby with lots of cute little animals and many deer, and she wanted Miles to accompany her there. In front of Chloe, Miles had always pretended to be a wild wolf willing to retract his claws and fangs, so naturally, he agreed to her request. When I had brewed the coffee, the 2 of them were also ready to set off. Miles took me with them on the pretext of asking me to take care of Chloe. This farm had just opened recently, and there weren't many people there. Chloe was even more excited than the little deer. Her smiling face bathed in the sunlight was just like the healing heroine in a romantic movie. Miles's smile was like scattering candies, all directed at her. I followed them a few steps behind, dutifully playing the role of a quiet subordinate. After watching them touch the rabbits and calves, finally, the main event came. Chloe suggested that there were newly born lambs in the small wooden shed that could be fed, and excitedly pulled Miles over there. I said to Miles from behind, "President Miles, can I go and have a drink of water and take a rest?" This was what I had agreed with Miles in advance. I told him that based on my understanding of Chloe, after she had been building up her feelings for so long, it was time for her to find an opportunity to make you trust her completely. So she would definitely make a move in the next few days, probably something like a self-harm trick. I asked him to pay more attention. If I noticed something was wrong, I would say this sentence to him, and then he should be on guard. Miles had been looking forward to me saying this sentence these days. Now that his wish had come true, his eyes lit up, and he happily followed Chloe into the wooden shed. I waited outside. I knew what Chloe was planning. After so many days, the progress of Chloe's pursuit of Miles had stalled, and they couldn't squeeze out a single point from him. Zachary has already been successfully conquered and can't provide many points anymore. My brother's situation has also been stable all along, without providing any new points. Finally, the system started to get a bit worried. Even though Chloe didn't have many points at hand, it made an exception and lent her a prop, which was to be used today. First, find an excuse to ask Miles out, and then find a small wooden shed like this one. Use the prop at the right time. The wooden shed will collapse, giving Chloe an opportunity to sacrifice herself to protect Miles. When falling, the system will adjust the angle and reduce the pain, creating a seemingly serious but not serious superficial injury for Truett. And under the influence of the prop, there will definitely be no trace of human interference found in the wooden shed. Everything is just a coincidence and a proof of love. The last act of feigning injury was the catalyst that pushed the relationship between Miles and the outsider to the extreme. This time, it's been used so early. It seems that they really have no other good ideas. I listened to Chloe's delicate laughter coming from inside the wooden shed, mixed with the system's prompt voice. I was a bit nervous. I originally wanted to use Miles to test whether what they said was true, but then it suddenly occurred to me that what if they were also using me to trick Miles into coming here? Maybe they already knew that I was using a fake identity and that I was hiding in the basement to spy on them, but they were just watching the show from a superior position? These days, I had been constantly reminding myself not to be overly suspicious because of these unconfirmed guesses, but I just couldn't control myself. I had been trying to calm myself down all the time, but the fear of the system was like a rope around my neck. It wasn't tightening, but I couldn't ignore it. It can do so many things that I can't even imagine. I can't guarantee whether my guesses are true or not, and I have no way to prove them either, because once I make a wrong move, I might turn this fear into a reality. Suspicion made the rope around my neck start to tighten. Suddenly, there was a loud noise as the roof of the wooden shed in front of me collapsed, and it also stirred up a cloud of dust in my heart. At that instant, I couldn't breathe. The animals started to flee while screaming. Tourists and staff exclaimed and gathered around the wooden shed. It was like converging rivers, and I was like a stone standing by the river, out of place. The area where the wooden shed collapsed wasn't large, and everyone quickly cleared away the broken wood and rescued the people inside. Miles only had some scratches, and Chloe was knocked unconscious. When the wooden shed collapsed, she pushed Miles away in time and was crushed under the wood herself. Miles carried her into the ambulance. I didn't follow them but hid behind and quietly took a few pictures with my mobile phone. I picked the most suitable one, logged into an anonymous online account with an anonymous mobile phone, and sent the photo to an overseas blogger who liked to collect New York gossip. I told her that I was playing on the farm and the wooden shed accidentally collapsed and injured a couple inside. I didn't know their injury situation yet, but the couple was really a perfect match and so good-looking that I couldn't help taking a picture. After seeing that the message had been read on the other side, I turned off the anonymous mobile phone. The staff on the farm started to clear the site and deal with the follow-up matters. I was driven out. Fortunately, Miles' car was still left here. This was the suburbs. After walking through large areas of grassland and entering the layers of dense forests, the setting sun lengthened its afterglow. I sat in the car feeling like being stuffed into a sealed can. Everything happened just as I had heard. However, I couldn't make an accurate judgment. It wasn't until this moment that I realized that I had been in fear all along. And countless loneliness grew out of this fear, and the loneliness made me weak. I walked from dusk to night and returned from the suburbs to the city before finally calming down. And no matter what the truth was, I could only choose one path to bet on. I bet that they hadn't discovered that I could eavesdrop on their inner thoughts, and I bet that the inability to locate my position was an error that they hadn't noticed. And then courage grew out of this bet. I parked my car by the roadside, turned on my mobile phone, and searched for that overseas blogger's account. The submission I sent had already been sorted out and posted by that overseas blogger's account, and there had been quite a few forwards and comments. I took a screenshot of this blog post, opened the messaging app, clicked on my brother's chat box, and sent the screenshot over. Brother, I came across this blog post. Is this Chloe? I can't get in touch with her now. I don't know how seriously she's injured. Brother, can you get in touch with Zachary? After their engagement, I deleted all of Zachary's contact information to avoid suspicion. Just 1 minute after I sent the photo, my brother called me but hung up before I could answer it. The photo I picked was taken with the lens zoomed in, and it happened to capture Chloe's unconscious face and a small part of the side face of the man holding her. Although it wasn't clear, if you looked at it a few more times, you would find that the man was definitely not Zachary. I waited for a while in front of the quiet chat box before calling back. It took a long time before my brother answered. His voice sounded a bit hoarse. Jewel. He called my name and then fell silent. Brother, don't overthink it. Now people on the internet are saying all kinds of things. Maybe it was just a kind-hearted person who saved Chloe? The most urgent thing now is to quickly get in touch with them. This is abroad, and she has no relatives around. We must make sure that nothing happens to Chloe. My sincere and anxious words awakened my brother's rationality. His voice rose and he muttered, "Yes, you're right. I'm being stupid. I'll go and contact them." Then he hung up the phone. Chloe's mobile phone and handbag were thrown to me by Miles when she was being sent to the ambulance. As her secretary, of course, I had to take good care of them for her. Since I couldn't get in touch with the person involved, I had to contact Zachary, who came to the United States with her. Chloe used me as a shield, certain that no matter what I said to Zachary, in Zachary's eyes, it would be slander and sophistry against Chloe. Then I might as well tell someone else about this. Since the trick of feigning injury has been used, how could there not be more onlookers? I didn't wait long in the car before a strange number called. As soon as I answered it, Zachary's accusations came pouring down. Jewel. What have you done to Chloe? Where is Chloe now? First, calm down. What do you mean by what have I done to her? I haven't seen her for a long time. What could I have done? I came across a blog post and saw that Chloe was injured. I was so worried that I called her, but couldn't get through. I had deleted your contact information, so I could only ask my brother to contact you. It should be me asking you what happened to Chloe. Aren't you supposed to be together? No. Didn't Chloe go to accompany you? Jewel, don't try to quibble. What on earth is going on? Why was Chloe injured? What photos? What nonsense are you talking about? What have you done to Chloe? His voice was hoarse from shouting. I had known Zachary for so many years. In both my past life and this life combined, I had never seen him lose his composure like this. She didn't come to see me at all. I haven't seen her at all. Didn't my brother make it clear to you? Anyway, I'll send you the photos in a while. Take a careful look at those photos. Do you know where that place is? Chloe is injured now and can't be reached. Our top priority is to find her. I shouted even louder than him. I was now the good sister who cared deeply for Chloe. After saying these words, I hung up the phone and sent the photos to Zachary. Immediately after that, I received a message from my brother. He was booking the fastest flight to come here. They were really like startled ducks in a pond. I didn't reply. I opened the browser, searched for a few records about the farm, and then sent another message to Zachary, telling him that I had found the specific location of the farm according to the search. I was now ready to start from this farm and search along the road for nearby hospitals to see if I could find Chloe. He'd better start looking too. Whoever found her should inform the other one. After sending the message, I sent the same message to my brother, asking him not to worry as we were already looking. After doing all this, I restarted the car and prepared to go back to remove my disguise and look for Chloe as Jewel. When I was at the farm, I asked the staff where the ambulance came from.